Imagine this. You're working late into the night. The only sound is the rhythmic hum of your printer as it churns out page after page. But tonight, something is different. The printer starts spewing out pages, not from your document, but from a hidden archive, a chilling record of someone else's secrets. As you try to make sense of it, you realize these documents are not just eerie. They are connected to a dark presence that now lurks in your home. What if I told you that the real horror began the night the printer started printing messages meant for someone else, someone who never wanted to be found? It all started on an ordinary night, with nothing more sinister than a little boredom and a search for distraction. I'd always been fascinated by dark web stories, those creepy threads and chilling videos that promise glimpses into the unknown. But nothing could have prepared me for what was about to unfold. The night was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you feel isolated. I was scrolling through random internet content, YouTube videos, Reddit threads, the usual digital junk food. But that night, something caught my eye. A thread discussing bizarre items bought from the dark web. Most of it was harmless. Old comic books, vintage electronics, quirky but benign. But then I saw it. A discussion about an old printer, supposedly haunted. At first, it seemed like one of those urban legends you hear about in scary stories. A printer that works on its own? Ridiculous. But the idea wouldn't leave me. The more I thought about it, the more I became fixated. I spent hours researching, diving deeper into forums and threads, trying to piece together the truth behind this eerie claim. I knew it was a foolish obsession, but curiosity had a way of consuming me. Eventually, I found an auction for an old printer. The listing was minimal, just a grainy photo and a brief description. Vintage printer, works on its own. The price was only $50. A small risk for what I assumed would be a pointless but interesting conversation piece. I placed my bid and won. A week later, a package arrived at my doorstep. It was brown, taped up, and entirely unmarked. Inside was the printer, which looked even older than I had imagined, something out of a 90s office. It had a musty smell, like a mix of burnt plastic and mildew. The power cord was frayed, and the whole thing seemed like it belonged in a junkyard rather than my spare room. I set it up in the spare room, more out of a sense of duty than excitement. The printer was old and beat up, but I figured it wouldn't do much more than gather dust. When I plugged it in, the noise it made was unnerving, an almost mechanical roar that filled the room. The printer vibrated so much that it shook the desk. I was expecting it to fizzle out, to die as old machines sometimes do. But no, it just sat there, humming and vibrating, as if it were alive. Days passed and the printer remained dormant. I almost forgot about it, until one night, around 2 a.m., when I heard it. The printer was on. I had unplugged it earlier that day. I went to check and found it powered up, its lights blinking erratically. To my horror, it began printing out pages, even though there was no paper in the tray. I froze, staring at the printer as it spat out page after page. The first few were disturbing, a series of black and white images of creepy porcelain dolls. Their lifeless eyes seemed to follow me as I flipped through the pages. But then came the 5th page, and it was something that shook me to my core. A photo of my late grandmother, the same one that had hung in our hallway when I was a child. She had passed away over 20 years ago, and this photo was the one my mother kept after her death. There was no way the printer could have known about this photo. I hadn't scanned it, uploaded it, or connected the printer to any devices. It wasn't even plugged in. The sight of that photo, the one that had haunted my childhood memories being printed out by this ancient, inexplicable machine, was too much. In a panic, I yanked the printer from the desk, threw open the window, and hurled it out into the backyard. The printer landed with a dull thud, and I slammed the window shut, my heart racing. The rest of the night was a blur of dread and sleeplessness. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong, that the printer's actions were more than just a mechanical glitch. The next morning I woke up feeling groggy and unsettled. I had barely slept. My mind clouded with a mix of fear and embarrassment. I tried to rationalize it. Perhaps the printer had some leftover memory from a previous owner, and the photos were just a weird coincidence. I decided to check the backyard to see if the printer had survived the fall. When I opened the back door, the printer was still there, lying in the grass. It didn't look broken from a distance. I approached it cautiously, half expecting it to start printing again, but it remained lifeless. I bent down to pick it up and noticed something strange. The paper tray was empty. There were no signs of the dozens of pages it had printed the night before. I felt a knot form in my stomach. Had I imagined the whole thing? Maybe it was a bizarre dream. But then I saw it. A single sheet of paper stuck under the printer. My hands shook as I picked it up and turned it over. It was a photo of me sitting at my desk in the spare room. The angle of the photo suggested someone had been standing at the doorway, watching me. The sight of that photo made my heart skip a beat. I couldn't understand how it was possible. I had checked the entire house for signs of intrusion, but everything was locked and secure. The printer had printed a photo of me that should not have existed. I spent the rest of the day in a state of paranoia, convinced that someone was watching me. I tried to tell myself it was an elaborate prank or a glitch, but deep down, I knew something far more sinister was at play. I considered calling the police, but how could I explain that I'd bought a haunted printer from the dark web? Instead, I decided the printer had to go, not just out the window, but completely out of my life. As I was about to dispose of it, a thought crossed my mind. What if the printer had more to show me? What if there were more photos, more clues hidden within its malfunctioning mechanisms? Despite my fear, curiosity got the better of me. I decided to let the printer print one more time to see if it had anything else to reveal. But as I plugged it in and turned it on, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was inviting more terror into my life. The printer's hum filled the room, and I waited with bated breath, hoping to uncover whatever secret it held. Imagine joining a chat room game with the promise of confronting your deepest fears, only to discover that the game knows more about you than you ever realized. I thought it was just a thrilling online experience, but as I progressed, the game began to manipulate my reality, showing me images and scenarios that felt disturbingly real. The final challenge forced me into a choice between facing my darkest fear or making a deal with an unknown entity. But little did I know, the true horror was not in the game itself, but in what it left behind, an ominous message that my ordeal was far from over. I had always been a fan of online games, particularly those with an edge of danger and intrigue. One evening, while navigating a dark web chat room, I came across an invitation to an exclusive game. The chat room was filled with users discussing the game, their messages filled with excitement and anticipation. The game was called The Final Challenge, and it promised a unique experience, one that was supposed to be life-changing if you dared to play. The description was vague, hinting at psychological thrills and high stakes, but it was enough to pique my interest. I was looking for something different, something that would push my limits. So I joined the chat room, eager to learn more about this mysterious game. The game's setup was elaborate. I had to fill out a detailed profile, including personal information and psychological questions. It seemed odd, but I brushed it off as part of the immersive experience. After submitting my information, I was given a set of instructions and told to wait for further communication. Days went by and I nearly forgot about the game until I received an encrypted message with the game's access code. The message was short but ominous. "You're in. The game begins soon." I entered the game's interface and was greeted by a virtual room that looked like a blend of an old horror movie set and a psychological thriller. The game's rules were simple. Complete a series of challenges and answer questions to advance. The challenges were designed to test your fears and sanity. The first few challenges were unsettling but manageable. Dark, confined spaces, creepy sounds, and disturbing visuals. The game used every trick in the book to create a sense of dread, but I was determined to push through. As I advanced, the challenges became more personal. I was forced to confront fears I had long buried and face scenarios that seemed disturbingly familiar. One challenge involved navigating a maze filled with images from my past. Pictures of my childhood home, my family, and even old friends. The deeper I went, the more intense the experience became. One of the most chilling parts of the game was a live interaction component. I had to chat with other players, but their responses were always unsettling. They seemed to know personal details about me, details I hadn't shared with anyone. The game's interface began to reflect my real-life surroundings, showing snippets of my room and even my reflection in the mirror. The final challenge was the most terrifying. I was instructed to enter a virtual room that mirrored my own home. The walls were covered with messages that seemed to be written by someone who knew me intimately. The room was filled with eerie sounds and distorted images of my own life. The game's final test was a choice: face a physical representation of my greatest fear, or make a deal with an unknown entity. I chose to face my fear, but as I did, the room became increasingly hostile. The walls seemed to close in and I felt a growing sense of dread. At the climax, the unknown entity appeared, a shadowy figure that offered me a choice: leave the game with a new identity and a fresh start, or stay and face an unknown consequence. In a moment of panic, I chose to leave, but the entity's voice echoed in my mind, warning me that leaving wouldn't erase what I had experienced. The game ended abruptly, and I was left with a profound sense of unease. I tried to distance myself from the experience, but the psychological impact lingered. I couldn't shake the feeling that the game had left something behind, a mark on my psyche that would never fully fade. I continued to receive strange, anonymous messages, each one more cryptic and unsettling than the last. The messages seemed to know personal details about my life, and they hinted that the game was far from over. Eventually, I deleted my account and severed all connections with the game, but the experience had changed me. I was left with a deep sense of paranoia and a lingering fear that the game had tapped into something far more sinister than just a virtual thrill. Have you ever wondered what happens when you bid on something that's not meant to be sold? I thought it was just a curiosity, a bit of forbidden thrill on a dark web auction site. But when I won the bid, I quickly discovered that my prize was far more than I bargained for. It started with a simple item, a seemingly ordinary box. But the real horror began when the box arrived, and I realized it wasn't just a piece of forgotten junk. What came next was beyond anything I could have ever imagined, leading me into a nightmare where every shadow in my house seemed to come alive with malevolent intent. It started as a harmless curiosity. I'd always been fascinated by the dark web, not out of any desire for danger, but from a sense of morbid curiosity. The stories were always there, anomalies, strange artifacts, and horrifying encounters. I never expected to get involved myself, but one late night, with nothing better to do, I found myself browsing through a dark web auction site. The items ranged from oddities to downright disturbing, but I never imagined I'd actually bid on anything. Among the listings was a small, unassuming box, labeled simply as rare collectible. The description was minimal, just a few cryptic lines hinting at its mysterious origins and a note about its unsettling past. Intrigued, I placed a bid, half expecting it to be a joke. To my surprise, I won the auction. The seller's message was curt. Payment received. The item will be shipped. Do not open it until you are alone. I thought it was just a gimmick, part of the dark web theatrics. But the warning piqued my interest even more. I eagerly awaited the arrival of my prize, convinced it would be an old piece of junk or a clever prank. A week later, the box arrived. It was much heavier than expected and wrapped in nondescript brown paper. No return address, no tracking details, just a plain cardboard box with a strange aura. I placed it on my dining table and hesitated for a moment, recalling the seller's warning. My curiosity won out and I carefully unwrapped it. Inside was a small wooden box, its surface intricately carved with symbols I couldn't recognize. It had a rusty latch and was surprisingly cold to the touch. I was about to open it when a sense of unease washed over me, but I brushed it aside, attributing it to the anticipation. As soon as I unlatched the box, a shiver ran down my spine. Inside was a collection of old photographs, yellowed with age, each depicting scenes of people I didn't recognize. Some were normal, others were grotesquely distorted. But it wasn't the photographs themselves that were alarming. It was what they hinted at. In the bottom of the box was a final photograph, one that was different from the rest. It showed a young woman standing in front of what appeared to be my house, her eyes hollow and expression eerie. The date on the photo was recent, only a few days old. I froze, realizing that the photograph had been taken while I was inside. As I stared at the photo, a cold draft swept through the room, and the lights flickered. I felt as though I was being watched. I immediately checked the security cameras around my house, but they showed nothing unusual. I convinced myself that it was a coincidence, just a disturbing prank. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound made me jump. I kept thinking about the photo and what it meant. I tried to rationalize it. Perhaps it was an elaborate prank by the seller or just an unsettling coincidence. Over the next few days, strange things started happening. Objects in my house moved on their own, and I heard footsteps echoing through empty rooms. The final straw came when I found a new photograph on my doorstep, showing me asleep in my bed. The photo was taken through a window, I knew for a fact that I had not seen anyone outside my home. The disturbances grew more intense. I started seeing shadowy figures in the corners of my vision, and the temperature in my house dropped inexplicably. I could hear whispers that seemed to come from nowhere, and the sensation of being watched never left me. Desperate to get to the bottom of it, I did some research on the symbols carved into the box. What I discovered was chilling. They were associated with dark rituals and curses, suggesting that the box might have been used in some malevolent ceremony. One night, after weeks of torment, I received a final message from the seller. I hope you enjoyed your experience. The box was just the beginning. Now it's time for you to face the consequences. Panicking, I decided to destroy the box, thinking it might end the haunting. But as I smashed it to pieces, the lights went out and a cold, oppressive darkness enveloped my house. The disturbances became more violent and the shadows grew more defined. I felt an overwhelming presence, something ancient and angry, as if the box had released a malevolent force into my home. In a desperate bid to escape, I fled the house, abandoning everything I had known. Even now, as I stay in a new place, I can't shake the feeling that the darkness from that cursed box still follows me. The photographs, the whispers, and the shadows, they are still with me, a constant reminder of the night I made the mistake of bidding on something that was never meant to be sold. And every now and then, when I'm alone in the dark, I swear I hear a whisper reminding me of the auction's warning. Some things are better left undiscovered. Have you ever stumbled upon a live stream that made your blood run cold? I did, and what I saw still haunts me to this day. It was a cold December night when I stumbled upon something that would change my life forever. I had been an avid live streamer for a while, exploring various channels and content in the depths of the internet. That night, I was browsing through obscure live streams when I came across something odd. A stream with no description and no identifiable creator. The thumbnail was blank, just a black screen with a faint blue dot in the center. Curiosity got the better of me. I clicked on it, expecting nothing more than another failed attempt at a stream. But as soon as the video loaded, my excitement turned to unease. The stream showed a dimly lit room with no one in it, just the faint hum of an old air conditioning unit. I shrugged it off as another abandoned stream, but something about it intrigued me. Over the next few nights, I kept checking the stream out of a mix of boredom and curiosity. The room remained unchanged, but there was something unsettling about it. Occasionally I would see strange flickers of movement in the corner of the screen, as if something or someone was lurking just out of sight. I convinced myself it was just my imagination, or perhaps some optical illusion created by the low-quality video feed. One night, however, things took a turn. The stream had been inactive for days, but when I clicked on it, the room was filled with a soft, eerie glow. A figure appeared in the corner of the room, partially obscured by shadows. My heart raced. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, watching. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a glitch or someone playing a prank. But as the nights went on, the figure became more pronounced. Sometimes it would be standing right in the middle of the room. Other times it would be crouching in the corner, its face hidden. I could barely make out the details, but the presence was undeniable. My fear turned into obsession. I couldn't stop watching, trying to decipher any clues about who or what this figure was. I noticed patterns in the stream. The figure seemed to appear more frequently at specific times, and sometimes the room would be filled with an unsettling silence, broken only by the occasional distant whisper. One particularly chilling night, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The figure seemed to reach out towards the camera, and the room's temperature dropped visibly on the stream's thermostat. I could almost feel the chill through the screen. I was paralyzed with fear, unable to look away, my mind racing with thoughts of what could be happening in that room. Then something happened that I still can't explain. The screen flickered, and suddenly the room was filled with images of my own home, my living room, my bedroom. I saw myself on the screen, sitting on my couch, staring at my computer. The shock was overwhelming. The room I was watching on the stream wasn't just a random, creepy place. It was a location tied to me. Desperate to get answers, I decided to investigate further. I used every tool at my disposal to trace the origin of the stream, but my efforts were in vain. The stream was coming from an anonymous source with no identifiable location. It was as if it was deliberately hidden. One night, as I watched the stream, something changed. The figure in the room seemed to be moving, its face becoming clearer. I saw eyes staring directly into the camera. My heart pounded as I realized that the figure was mimicking my every move, as if it was a mirror image of me, watching and waiting. The room's lights flickered violently, and the figure suddenly lunged at the camera, its scream echoing through my speakers. I could feel the sound in my bones, a deep guttural noise that seemed to reach out from the screen. I tried to shut down the stream, but the interface was unresponsive. I was trapped in a nightmarish loop. When the stream finally cut off, I was left in stunned silence. My heart raced as I frantically checked my surroundings, convinced that something from the stream had crossed over into my reality. I spent the rest of the night awake, my mind racing with thoughts of what I had seen. The stream never returned. The channel was deleted, and all traces of it vanished from the internet. I still don't know what I witnessed that night or why it targeted me. The experience left me with a deep sense of unease. I stopped live streaming altogether and avoided dark corners of the internet, haunted by the memory of that mysterious, malevolent figure.